Bank of America hasn't been incredibly well liked. In fact, I think we can go as far as to say that they've been one of the most hated companies out there. Do you know all these lists that have been put out about the worst or most hated companies? Well, Bank of America tends to show up on them. I always mention a particular one on this series because I think it's a great reflection of the public's opinion. The Consumerist used to have this tournament each year where people voted to determine the worst company in America. Well, Bank of America never actually won, but they were the runner-up in 2011, 2012, and 2013, losing to BP and then Electronic Arts the following 2 years, essentially making them the second worst company in America for 3 years straight, which is pretty bad. So my goal today is to try to provide some reason behind all of this hatred. To be clear, this isn't about my own personal opinions, nor am I trying to persuade your opinions in any way. I have simply noticed that this company is generally disliked, and I want to talk about why. There are actually countless potential reasons, so I've isolated some of the bigger ones and placed them into 5 main categories. First off, would probably be the most direct and obvious reason to the millions of people that have personally dealt with Bank of America over the years, the customer satisfaction. This right here relates to the extra fees or the wait times or whatever makes you unhappy with your bank. It's hard to prove things like this, but we can look toward the American Customer Satisfaction Index. Based on customer surveys, they assign a benchmark to each industry and then rate the companies in relation to it. Bank of America has never exceeded that benchmark, and in fact, about half of that time, they were the absolute lowest rated among all major banks. Just looking at these numbers, I'm guessing that there are plenty of people watching this that have had some negative experiences as a customer of Bank of America. I don't want to spend this time talking about specific cases, but for anyone who has a good story that applies here, I encourage you to leave it in the comments so we can read about it. For my next reason, I'm going to keep it simple and say that people don't like Bank of America because they are big. Some would say too big to fail, which I'll be talking about later. It's no secret that people tend to dislike larger companies, especially larger banks, and Bank of America, for decades, has been one of the largest. Currently, the second largest in the US when you rank them by total assets, and how they got to that size is important here, so I want to use this as an excuse to talk about the history of Bank of America while highlighting some of the ways that they were able to grow to over $2 trillion in total assets. The company goes all the way back to 1904 with a 33-year-old son of Italian immigrants named A.P. Giannini. See, his father-in-law was pretty wealthy. He owned a portion of a small bank in San Francisco, and when he died, Giannini was placed into a director position at that bank. Now, at that time, the standard for banking was to play it safe by providing loans and other banking services to the larger businesses and the wealthier individuals, and pretty much ignoring the people with less money. Giannini felt that this was foolish because there was a large population of immigrants and farmers that could benefit from their services, and urged the rest of the board to expand their client base. When they refused to do that, he took the idea that he believed in, raised $150,000 from investors, and opened his own bank directly across the street from that other one. It was initially called Bank of Italy, specializing in loans to the less wealthy Italian immigrant population and many others that were refused service from those other banks. 2 years later, San Francisco was hit by a massive earthquake, destroying almost every business in the area, including the Bank of Italy. Luckily, he was able to rescue $80,000 in cash from it and quickly used that money to set up a stand where he would make agreements to loan it out. So during a time when the city needed money to rebuild, he was among the only ones that was able to provide it to them. 3 years later, he started expanding into new areas by acquiring struggling banks around California and turning them into new branches of his bank. In the 1920s, he started opening them in other states nearby, and the name of the locations were changed to Bank of America. It all continued, and by the time Giannini died, it was the largest bank in the country with over 500 branches and $5 billion in total assets. Some of the more notable things that they've done over the years: in 1932, during the Great Depression, when no one else would fund it, Bank of America provided the money that allowed the construction of the Golden Gate Bridge. Later in that decade, Disney found much needed funding from Bank of America. They were the ones who provided the money to make all of these classic films, including their first one, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, followed by Dumbo, Bambi, Pinocchio, and many others. And in addition to all of that, they loaned Disney the money that allowed them to construct Disneyland and Disney World. Another thing worth mentioning is in 1958, they introduced Bank AmeriCard. I have another video that talks all about this, but it was essentially the first modern-day credit card that changed its name to Visa in the 1970s. So just to recap here, without Bank of America, we may not have the Golden Gate Bridge, Disney, or even credit cards in the way that we have them today. Jumping ahead to the 1990s is when they really started growing out of control through a series of mergers and acquisitions. In 1998, they merged with Nations Bank in an almost $50 billion deal that technically meant Nations Bank was acquiring Bank of America. They just chose to use the name Bank of America for the combined company. It created the first ever bank that reached from one US coast to the other, and it sparked a lot of major changes. Their headquarters moved from San Francisco to Charlotte, and that's when they adopted that famous flag logo that they've been using ever since. In 2003, they bought Fleet Boston Financial Corporation in another deal valued at almost $50 billion. That was a major bank centered around New England that had 1,500 branches. In 2005, they bought the credit card issuer MBNA Corporation for about $35 billion. Bank of America was already the third largest credit card company, and that acquisition pushed them into first place. In 2007, they bought LaSalle Bank for over $20 billion, giving them a major presence in the Chicago market. Then, in 2008, they bought the world's largest mortgage lender, Countrywide Financial, for about $4 billion, and the following year, they bought investment bank Merrill Lynch in a deal initially valued, again, around $50 billion. Those last two acquisitions lead me to my next reason behind the hatred, which I'm just going to call the recession. See, Countrywide Financial was deeply involved in originating subprime mortgages. If someone didn't qualify for a regular mortgage, they would instead get a subprime mortgage at a higher rate. All of this is at the center of the housing crisis. Basically, they were giving out all of these mortgages that people could not afford, and by 2007, 2008, when the housing bubble burst and everyone was defaulting on these mortgages, it was bad for Countrywide and the economy in general. I do have a video about Lehman Brothers that talks more about this crisis, but that's the main idea. I can confidently say that buying this company was not good for Bank of America as far as their reputation or financially, because it put them at the center of so many penalties and lawsuits. Just some of the bigger ones. In 2011, they paid an $8.5 billion settlement to investors who bought securities backed by their mortgages that they claim were misrepresented to be more stable and more valuable than they actually were. Then in 2013, there was a $10 billion settlement with Fannie Mae because Countrywide sold them a bunch of these faulty mortgages. In 2014, there was a $16.65 billion settlement with the Justice Department related to all of this that was actually the largest civil settlement with any single firm in American history. And by the way, I should mention, 2008's winner for the worst company in America was Countrywide Financial. And as far as the investment bank Merrill Lynch, that one brought criticism as well from the public and from their own stockholders. Those stockholders voted to approve the acquisition, but then they claimed that they were misled as far as the losses that Merrill Lynch was sustaining and the bonuses that were being paid to the executives. In 2009, the SEC charged the Bank of America a $33 million penalty because right before the deal closed, Merrill Lynch paid their executives $3.6 billion in bonuses without informing the voting investors. Then in 2012, there was a $2.4 billion settlement paid to those investors. On top of all of that, this whole deal looked especially bad to the public because it was right when they were receiving money from the US government as part of their troubled asset relief program. So all around the same time period, they were receiving $45 billion from the government while spending billions of dollars on a risky investment and paying executives billions of dollars in bonuses. Ken Lewis, the CEO of Bank of America at the time, stepped down from his position just months later, almost certainly due to the backlash from all of this. I realize that this entire subject is complex and political, but we can understand how many people would have a negative perception of Bank of America following the recession. My next reason behind all of this hatred would be their connection to some infamous accounting scandals. Now, this could be said about other banks as well, but Bank of America was involved in two of the biggest all-time accounting scandals. In 2004, they paid a $69 million settlement to Enron shareholders who who sued them for their role as an underwriter in their accounting fraud. The lawsuit claimed that they actively engaged and participated in the fraudulent scheme. Then in 2005, they paid a $460 million settlement to the WorldCom shareholders who had a very similar claim. Any involvement in the WorldCom and Enron scandals is not seen favorably by the public. For my last reason, I hate to say it, but discrimination. It's sad to see it for obvious reasons, but especially because the company was practically founded on providing services to minorities. Even as late as the 1960s, they were the first major employer in California to sign a statement of racial equality in hiring. Again, it's shocking how many lawsuits and penalties that they've been involved in here. Some of the more notable ones: in 2011, the Justice Department fined Bank of America $335 million because Countrywide had been discriminatory in their lending practices. They're found to be giving African American and Hispanic borrowers higher mortgage rates than the white people who came in with similar qualifications. In 2013, there was a $160 million settlement related to Merrill Lynch. That one had to do with their hiring practices and corporate culture involving African Americans over the years, and similarly, the following month, the Department of Labor forced Bank of America to pay over $2 million for unfairly not hiring African Americans into entry-level jobs. Again, those are just a few cases. You could find many other examples of potential discrimination over at Bank of America. So that's my list. They are a large bank with low customer service ratings that's been heavily involved in 2008's economic recession, that has been connected to some of the biggest accounting scandals, and has had multiple accusations of discrimination. It's not a complete list, but I think that should be enough to explain why Bank of America is so hated. Let me know in the comments, what is your opinion of Bank of America? If you happen to be one of the many people that doesn't like them, is it for one of the reasons that I outlined, or for something completely different? If you are a customer of Bank of America, I'm curious how that's been. Do they deserve to be so low on the customer satisfaction index, or have you had a different experience? And any other thoughts you have about Bank of America, either good or bad, leave them in the comments. I'd like to hear what you have to say. Thank you for watching.